Back there. Then we'll go ahead and call tonight's meeting to order of the January 9th regular meeting of the Board of Commissioners. If you would please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please remain standing for a brief moment of silence. Thank you. We have no changes to the agenda, so I will entertain a motion to adopt the agenda as presented.
So moved.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, public comments. We have 7 or 8, so we'll start with John Hunt, 3512 Doe Lane, and he is a resident.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, Mr. Manager, Madam Clerk, and Mr. Attorney. I stand before you this evening to speak about an item on the agenda concerning the feasibility study engaging South Piedmont Community College, Wingate University, and the town of Waxhaw. As a member of the Board of Commissioners that unanimously voted for the feasibility study, I feel compelled to speak up on this issue. I am very disheartened by the multiple groups that already have the college built before the study group could even have their first meeting. The prior Board of Commissioners continued the work of boards before them in trying to forge partnerships with all entities to further develop the vision of Waxhaw. Waxhaw is a friendly, vibrant, prosperous town where history and creativity build an enduring, safe, and healthy community for people of all ages to live, learn, work, play, or grow a business. The simple purpose of the study, as defined, was to determine if a portion of property owned by the town of Waxhaw could become a college satellite facility offering associate, bachelor, and graduate classes and park amenities. The feasibility study was also to include engagement of stakeholders and the public with special emphasis on community members of the town of Waxhaw and Western Union County. As this board meets tonight to discuss the agenda item of feasibility study discussion, I ask you all to consider the following statement. Educating our children is the single most important task possibly of any parent or any community. We owe it to these children to do for them anything that they can. We owe any school the support that they ask for. They shouldn't have to fight for it. They shouldn't have to hire lawyers to get it. It's what we as responsible people owe our community, our schools, and our children. And I'd like to see us give that support to these children. Thank you. While I would like to take credit for these words, I cannot. For these words were spoken by then candidate and now Commissioner Kat Lee. I sincerely hope this board follows the courageous lead of Commissioner Lee and stands with South Piedmont Community College and Wingate University for the future of higher education in Waxhaw and Western Union County for the children and adult learners alike. Thank you for your attention and the opportunity to speak with you concerning this very important matter this evening.
Thank you. Michelle Burnett. Michelle, are you here? Okay. Okay, I'm going to, Tim Bagdasarian. Thank you. Bagdasarian.
My name is Tim Bagdasarian. I live at 8920 Red Barone here in Waxhaw. I stand with a group of current concerned citizens who want to save and protect all of our parks from being developed and used for any other purpose than a park. It has been quite concerning recently to see the lack of transparency exhibited by town officials in their recent attempt to push through the project. Last night, the town of Waxhaw was removed from the SPC feasibility study by Dr. Farr. A few examples of concern I have on transparency with the town. First of all, meeting minutes have not been posted since October 10th, 2017. At At the November 28th Board of Commissioners meeting, which was the first official announcement of SPCC wanting the parkland at Waxhaw Marvin Road, Dr. Farr was not listed on the posted public agenda. Commissioner Burrell has said that this project would be tough to stop. There have been many inaccurate statements made that the community colleges could not acquire land. Yet this contradicts the 2016 election ballot for the bond approval and the North Carolina general statutes. At the December 21st public hearing, Town Manager Greg Ferguson provided an 8-minute presentation, which he ended by not taking any questions and walked out of the room. This was the town's attempt to bully and silence the citizens. Had it not been for the actions displayed by Mr. Ferguson and the rebel-rousers in the crowd, we could have had a civil and transparent discussion. Also, what our town mayor must now realize is that because of the town's recent behaviors, they have actually brought hundreds of residents together to stand up and fight for what is important to them. Unfortunately, we have 3 new commissioners who had no part in approving the study and are now left to clean up the mess left by the previous board. Moving forward, we can only hope that they will make decisions that are in the best interest of the town and support the reasons why so many families chose to move here. This land belongs to the taxpayers of Waxhaw, and none of the acreage from this tract of land should be given away or sold. I am asking that one of our new commissioners, before this meeting is over tonight, make a motion for the 3818 Waxhaw Marvin Road property to be officially deeded as a park and officially end the feasibility study with SPCC. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ferguson, would you make sure, go back and have staff look at all the claims in there, and if we need to correct anything for the record, do so. Thank you. Candace DeFinis.
Good evening. My name is Candace DeFinis. I live at 8313 Willow Branch Drive in Waxhaw. Tonight my public comments will be focused around the parkland at 3818 Waxhaw Marvin Road. This land was purchased in March of 2013 for $1.55 million of taxpayer monies. This land, in fact, has been on the park inventory list and still remains there to this day. According to the data that I received from the town of Waxhaw, it is the second largest parcel at 34.66 acres that the town owns today, the largest being H.C. Nesbitt Park at 40 acres. The previous Board of Commissioners has endangered this property twice. In December of 2016, they made a 4-to-1 vote to enter a land swap agreement with Trayton Homes. The land swap agreement was not beneficial to the residents of the town of Waxhaw, and when the agreement with Trayton Homes was made null and void on March the 14th of 2017 at the Board of Commissioners meeting, our mayor also made a statement that he had entered conversations with SPCC according to the meeting minutes. Then on the 11/28 of 2017, Dr. Farr made her unscheduled and undocumented presentation to the board and asked for approval of this feasibility study. At that time, there were lame duck members of our Board of Commissioners. Yesterday, SPCC announced that they would be moving forward with their study, but choosing not to partner with Waxhaw at this time. I will call upon the Board of Commissioners to make a motion to officially end this feasibility study, to make an effort to protect our limited and underserved park resources. Save Waxhaw Park is going to continue to move forward. We are taking action to become a 501c3. We plan on supporting our town to deed all parkland to the citizens of Waxhaw for our children and our children's children, to ensure that we will not develop this land and that it will be available to all future generations. We are planning to fundraise and support the efforts to open Waxhaw Marvin Road Park, as well as plans to open the downtown park that have been shelved and ignored for years. We are putting together this organization to help the town and the residents of Waxhaw to have the park space they deserve. We want to collaborate and participate actively with the development of our parks. We are not going to make any more land in Waxhaw. We are not. We need to preserve and protect the parkland that we have today. Additionally, I would like to say that if we want to encourage the education and the support of schools here in Waxhaw, which we all should for all of our children, then this board and this previous board should have supported the Uniter Day Charter School with their efforts. Thank you.
Thank you. Tanya Rem.
Good evening. My name is Tanya Rem, and I'm a citizen here of Waxhaw, new to the community. I want to recognize something exceptional. The citizens, with their vote, mine included, formed a board of commissioners with a majority of women. Thank you. A few weeks ago, though, the prior board of commissioners approved a feasibility study to place a SPCC campus on Waxhaw Marvin Parkland. Now SPCC is evaluating other locations. I'd like to voice my concerns with the way in which the prior board and mayor conducted and communicated these decisions. I sincerely hope we won't compromise healthy debate in the future and full transparency. Clearly, the record shows that the purchase of 3818 Waxhaw Marvin Road was intended for parkland. We ask that this board take it upon themselves to immediately begin to carry out the many important goals of our park plan, which include bringing into use the 34.5 acres of land along Waxhaw Marvin Road for the community to enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe it's Dell Archer? Archer. Okay, thank you. Sorry.
That's fine, Mr. Mayor. My mom told me I should have been a doctor the way my penmanship was. First of all, I just want to thank you for the opportunity. My name is Dale Archer. I'm at 5509 Stone Mill Road. I am here because of my observations a couple of weeks ago on the local news outlets that actually shocked and dismayed me. I am here to hopefully promote civility and to encourage continued involvement. I am very encouraged by the number of people here today. I'm also very encouraged by the responsiveness of some of the council commissioners that I have reached out to. It was, like I say, it was very eye-opening for me. I had known of the classic tank tower controversy and the concerns with the branding as the Hall, and I appreciate those types of things. But I think the key, as it's been stated by a number of people earlier, is communication that is open, thorough, accurate, and timely. And I would just call upon you guys to continue and redouble your efforts towards that. I would also call on the people that are here hearing my sound of my voice that are citizenry to maintain their passion for their concerns for our community. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Pat Bessinger.
Messenger 8505 White Hawk Hill Road here in Waxhaw. I'm probably going to guarantee I'm not going to be as eloquent as all of the prior speakers. It's up here, and whatever comes out, but y'all are asking for transparency, is that correct? Mind if I be transparent?
This way, Pat. Pat.
Well, I want them to hear, can they
But
hear
you
me?
can speak to us.
Okay.
Okay?
So can I be transparent?
You can be transparent to us.
I have a little story. I am a product of a community college, and I just want to tell my little story, but I attended the first community college that was ever built in the United States here, and it was in Conshohocken, Pennsylvania, a steel mill town, and 1 square mile. Conshohocken meant Pleasant Valley. So anyhow, as fate would have it, I was born into a blue-collar family, and there's nothing wrong with that. But they did not put a value on any education because, as Daddy told me, I was going to get married and have babies anyway. So I just went to work after high school. And a community college moved into my town, and they moved into the little, much like our little main street here, they started occupying abandoned and condemned buildings in our town. So the little public high school became where the classrooms were, and the little church down the street became the library, et cetera. Well, I got a job there, and I was a clerk in the admissions office at 19 or 20 years of age, but I ended up getting an associate degree for free because I worked there. And in the meantime, they built this big campus about 15 miles away, the Blue Bell campus, and it occupied 184 acres with 5 mammoth buildings. And I continued to work there and got my associate degree. Temple University came over and said, we want to marry you, whatever, not me, but the college, whatever credits you get, we'll take, as long as you pass them. So I ended up getting a degree, a bachelor's degree. But I will tell you, if it wasn't for my community college roots, to tell you the truth, I don't know where I'd be today. I don't know where I would be. And it all happened from that. The route that I took was my own personal journey. But when I got my first job from a young woman that didn't know where she was going or what she was doing, when they offered me my first salary at my full-time job, I went, what? And they said, isn't that enough? And I said, yeah. So it just changed the trajectory of my life. The man that I met, he married me because he thought I was interesting and because I put myself through school. So I thank God for that, but it changed my whole trajectory. So I want to thank my community college roots. And if they wanted to come to this town, I don't care if they built on a swamp, if there's other people out there whose lives could be changed as it changed mine, so be it. That's all I have to say. So thank you for listening to my transparency.
Thank you, Pat. Sudishna?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and the Board of Commissioners. I am Sudeshna Banerjee, and I live on 8701 Anklin Forest Drive, 11-plus years resident of Waxhaw. As all of us in this room can appreciate that Waxhaw is a fast-growing residential community. And we've seen tremendous growth, and ever since I've moved in, we've seen tremendous growth in Waxhaw over the last 10 years. But one thing we need to keep in mind as a town and as elected officials is responsible growth. We appreciate education. We need to educate our children. We appreciate continuing education to community college, but responsible growth. Waxhaw is a pristine town. Let's keep our nature, let's keep the character of Waxhaw intact as we grow the city. Many of you in this room will remember, when Food Line wanted to come right in our backyards in Anklin Forest Drive. As a community, we said, this is not the right place for Food Line. And having said that, we said, we appreciate commercial, we know it brings in tax dollars, but let's keep residential, zone this residential, and let's put anything that's non-residential where it belongs. There's Providence Road, there's a lot of opportunity for developing, the strip along Providence Road. And as you can all imagine, parks basically play an important part of a town's ecosystem. Think about it. Think green. Think conserving nature. Think about a place where the town basically gathers, kids play. Let's keep that intact. We as a town have an opportunity to create or to maintain or to keep intact a green space that we acquired in the first place, allocating that as a park. So I'm appealing to you to keep that impact, and I'm appealing to you to close out the feasibility study of SPCC. They're out of the running. If they need a spot, put them on Providence Road, put them on anything that's zoned commercial. We're not opposed to that, but keep parkland intact. Thank you.
Thank you. At this point in time, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the consent agenda. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Chief Ice.
Mr. Mayor, Manager. We are here tonight to celebrate 10 years of service for an outstanding officer that works for this department, Sergeant Michael Mulligan. Sergeant Mulligan. Sergeant Mulligan was hired 12/17/2007. He was 21 years of age when I hired him. I was scared to death to hire him because of that. He's promoted to sergeant on 9/27/2015. Throughout his 10-year career, he's been a detective, he's an instructor, and probably he's an all-around great employee, and I'm thrilled to death to have him work with me in this department. He's one of the reasons why we were making this department great, and we're making this town great again as well. So if the mayor and the town manager would come, and we'll get a photo op here with this award.
Greg, you want to go ahead?
It's my privilege to acknowledge a second employee of the town of Waxhaw tonight, and that's our chief, Michael Ice, who's the chief of police. Chief Ice started his career with the town of Waxhaw in November of 2002. He moved quickly into the position of police chief in August of 2006. Chief Ice has been very instrumental in growing our department and making sure that we are responsive to the needs as the town has grown very rapidly over the last decade and a half. Some of the notable things that the chief has been involved in here in the town is the Citizens Academy. And so there's a number of citizens who've been able to participate in that academy, and if you have not, that's an excellent opportunity to get to know a little bit about the department and about the town. So the chief has been instrumental there. Also, I believe one of the things that's notable under his tenure here with the town is the institution of community policing, and really making that part of an integral part of the department and how we respond to crime, and then also crime prevention. So that's another notable thing. And one that doesn't get any attention really, I don't think, outside maybe the town staff, is that the town police department enjoys the highest clearance rate for investigations in the state, which is notable. That is something that's reflective upon the chief and the members of the staff of the Waxhaw Police Department. So those are three things that are pretty notable about the chief and his tenure. So I'd like to commend him for 15 years of excellent service and say congratulations.
We have no presentations. Commissioner reports. Commissioner Burrow?
Yes, thank you. There, with the drama and so forth in the last couple of weeks, there's one person in my neighborhood I would like to thank especially. She was not in favor of the the SPCC feasibility study, but my wife and I ran into her at Costco, and I think she had the most interesting and insightful comment. Deborah Del Monte, I have a great deal of respect for you after that comment. I won't repeat it. I think it's up to you if you'd like to say it, but very, very well spoken. Thank you.
Commissioner Westlake?
Okay. First of all, I'd like to say thank you to the citizens who have reached out to me through email, messaging, calling me, talking to me in Harris Teeter. I do appreciate hearing from all of you. I hope you've been satisfied with the communication that I've been providing back for you. I haven't been able to email everybody back. There's been so many emails, but I'm still working on it. I was hoping to have the opportunity tonight to speak for the first time on my stance and opinions on the feasibility study. I do think, had the public given us, the new board, an opportunity to work on this, that you would have been satisfied tonight. I know that there's some mistrust out there, but some things as a board we're just not allowed to say on our own, and we have some restrictions, but I did try to do my best to calm things down and ask for some patience with this. Now that the feasibility study has ended, I do hope and challenge you to focus on the positive of having an SPCC or community college here in town. If some of y'all don't have children yet in school, our local high schools allow the students in the senior years to take classes at the community college, earning their high school credit as well as college credit. Obviously, you all are aware of the trades and certifications that people can have for the medical field and technology fields. This also would provide, if Wingate has the partnership, a four-year degree for students and graduate studies for our professional citizens here. So there are benefits to having a community college, and I hope that now you can focus on helping us find a way that we can still get SPCC here in the best location. One other thing, there's so much passion here. There's something coming up the next meeting. The library will be here presenting. We are at a risk of losing our library here in Waxhaw too. I am hoping that you all can come to that in a positive manner and show support for keeping our library here in Waxhaw. I know that the commissioners in the county commissioners, November 2016, wanted a partnership of land for the community college and the library. That's not the plan anymore, but I'm hoping that the negativity that's occurred in Waxhaw is not going to affect that choice where the library is located. So I just challenge all of you now to focus a more positive way and help us keep our library and hopefully get some more educational opportunities here in Waxhaw. Thank you.
Commissioner Lee?
Yes, I have a few remarks for tonight. A few things that I would like to say. Forgive me for reading. I tend to do better when I'm prepared. Abraham Lincoln happens to be my favorite president. And he once famously said that governments should behave with malice towards none, with charity for all, and with firmness in the right as God gives us to know the right. Unfortunately, that has not been the case here in town recently. On December 11th, less than 24 hours before this current board was sworn in, the previous board held a special lame duck session for the sole and express purpose of punishing a member of a volunteer committee for voicing an opinion in opposition to that of members of this board, past and present. At that meeting, with malice of thought and malice of purpose, a 5-year veteran volunteer was dragged before the board like a criminal on unfounded and ultimately false charges. She was accused of posting public statements against the donation of our parkland to SPCC on the public site next door, which it was revealed she did not do. No apology was given to her for those charges that proved unfounded, nor was her apology for any actions on her part accepted. Her apology was in fact contemptuously thrown back in her face. And while those claims against her were found to be untrue and others were apologized for as a result of not being a native English speaker, it turns out the very manner in which she was treated by the then board is in fact a violation of this board's conduct and rules for behavior. At the end of this malicious mockery of justice, Ms. Johnsina was summarily relieved of her position. She was in fact railroaded off of a volunteer committee. And I would like to take this moment to offer my sincere apologies to Ms. Johnsina for the way that she was treated. I know Ms. Sinna has a great love for this community, and I am truly sorry that this experience may have tarnished it for you. I would also like to take a moment to ensure our town's other dedicated volunteers and any of you who've considered volunteering but have backed away in light of the way Ms. Sinha was treated, I would like to extend to you my assurances that that sort of behavior will not go unchallenged. Please do not give up on our town. Please continue to volunteer, begin to volunteer, because the time and effort that you so generously give to our community is vitally important, and we would all be the poorer for your loss.
Thank you. Mr. Stewart. Burns.
I would like to tag on to that statement that Commissioner Lee stated about John Cena. I've known Jonna through the Parks and Rec, where I met her on that board when I was a liaison from this board in the first year. I know that she's very dedicated. She's spent 5 years loving Waxhaw, volunteering for Waxhaw, and promoting the town. And I would like to also apologize for the way you were treated.
Mayor Pro Tem McMillan.
Well, I think my remarks are going to be a lot longer than the prior commissioners, so please bear with me, and I hope that everyone can hear me.
Is it turned on?
Can you hear me now?
There we go.
Okay. All right. I said my remarks are going to be a little more lengthy than the other commissioners, so please bear with me. So I would like to first say good evening to Mayor Maher, my fellow board members, town manager Greg Ferguson, town staff, our town lawyer, and our Waxhaw citizens. I thank you for coming out this evening. And thank you for voting for those of us who are up here. You voted for us to represent you. An email was received from a concerned citizen by the board members, and I will read in part what one line from it. It says, "Respect starts with our leaders via their actions." That came from Ms. Bonnie Racinko. And that is the first thing that I would like to start with. As a newly elected commissioner, it is my hope that you will give me and this new board the opportunity to set that precedent. In return, it is also my hope that as commissioners and as citizens, we will all be respectful of each other. Higher education is a great thing. I taught at a community college, so I understand the need for a community college and how it helps many. With regard to SPCC, many of my Anklin Forest neighbors and people I have met in the street, in the stores, and along the way have asked me questions with regard to my stance on SPCC. Although the issue may be moot at this moment, I told them that I would respond tonight, and I will. I did not respond previously because of ethical considerations in trying to follow the rules and procedures that we as commissioners are bound by, that I wanted to respect that process. But tonight is the perfect forum and the opportunity for me to tell you what I knew or did not know or how I felt about the project, and I will. Did I know anything about SPCC prior to November 28th, 2017? No, I did not. Did I know it during the campaign? No, I did not. There was not a part of any backroom negotiations or deals that I was aware of, a part of, participated in, or knew anything about. To my knowledge, there was no conspiracy on my part or any other board members. If it was presented here tonight, I was asked, how would I have voted? How would the board have voted? You might be surprised by the questions and/or actions of this new board. Did I have questions? Yes. Did I have concerns? Yes. Did I ask for the opportunity to have this board meet with Dr. Farr and/or those who could address a number of those questions? Yes. Some questions were, how long did SPC look at Waxhaw as a possible location? Why was the particular parcel of land chosen? What other parcels were looked at or available? How would this affect the surrounding communities? A number of questions, a number of issues. Many have asked, did I agree with the land selection for a potential college? If we had to vote on that issue tonight, then my answer would have been no. And that would have been for traffic reasons, zoning reasons, finance reasons, a number of reasons and a number of questions and a number of issues. Were we against SPCC or I? No. But there were a number of issues and questions that needed to be asked, that needed to be addressed, and that needed to be answered. But we were not, as a board, given that opportunity. I personally have had people demand answers, tell me that I had answers which I did not have or did not know. I have had fingers pointed in my face. I have been talked about, labeled, referred to as one of them. I don't know who them refers to. Misquoted, disrespected, in person and in print. All unfairly and unjustly. All of these things before this board even had the opportunity to meet or make any decisions. There are many preconceived notions about this board, regarding the commissioners, regarding each one of us. There's a lot of mistrust, divisiveness, and negativity. But I ask you this evening to give this new board the opportunity to come together, to work together for what is in the best interest of Waxhaw. Will we disagree? Absolutely. Do we have to be disagreeable? Absolutely not. Can we compromise? Yes, we can. Can we work together as a board and as a town? My hope is yes. I do not see this as an us against them, but I see this as a we. We can work together. We can do what is in the best interest for the town. We can set aside self-interest for town interests. We can do what is right, what is fair, and what is just. This board, for the first time, consists of 4 women. Many believe we will not get along, that there will be cat fights, or even worse. Oh, it's been stated. As from my perspective, and in talking to the members and the women on this board, you are wrong. We will not agree on everything, but that is a good thing, to have a different opinion, a difference of opinion, but one thing we are committed to doing, and that is doing what is right. Not for one individual, not for one group, not for a small segment, not for one segment of the population, not for the north side, not for the south side, not for the east side, not for the west side, but for Waxhaw. That's what we are committed to. But one thing we will need your help. Not to be quick to judge, not to unfairly judge, not to label, but to ask questions and obtain factual information and give us the opportunity to do that which you have elected us to do. I have no agenda other than to do what is in the best interest of the town. If anyone has said otherwise or told you otherwise with regard to me, then they do not know me. There are many people here who do know me and who do know that I'm about doing what is right, that I'm about doing what is fair, that I will be honest with you in my dealings, that I will respond to you as best I can, and if I don't have the information, I will find it, and I will work for you to the best of my ability. It has been said that I seem to be a person who wants to learn rather than react, and not react and learn. This is true. There needs to be more facts learned to be able to apply them properly and follow proper procedure. If there are rules and a process, it should be followed, not by some or most or when it's convenient, but by all. It is my hope, and I am hopeful, I am truly hopeful, that moving forward, that we can and we will come together, that we will work together, that we will respect each other, that we will disagree, but we will not be disagreeable, that we will compromise, that we will ask questions, that we will not be quick to judge, but that we will be open to communicate with each other. I welcome the opportunity to meet with you, to listen to you, to share any information I have from the board, with the board, and get your points across as accurately and quickly and professionally as I can. I have set up monthly dates that will occur at the Duncan McDonald House, and the first date will be on February the 5th at 10 a.m. Those dates are set with the events and planning staff. Anyone can check the times between now and July. If I need to be there twice a month and you need to meet with me, I will be there. If I need to be there every week and you have questions or concerns, you let me know and I will be there. I am here to work for you, to serve you to the best of my ability. We as a board, this is our first meeting, and we are asking you to give us the opportunity and to give us the chance to do what is right. Now, I've listened to many speak tonight, and there were some remarks regarding the park, and with respect to the park, I just want to make a couple of statements. The park was on my platform when I ran. If anybody saw my card or read anything, parks was something that I was interested in protecting, and still am. But I think as a group of citizens, along with this group of commissioners, that we can collaborate and participate actively and work together. We do not have to be a separate entity, because we are not separate. We are together. We are Waxhaw. That's who we are. So let us come together and work together. Give us that chance to do that before forming anything separately. Maintain your passion, but work with us, not against us, because we and I am not against you. I am currently on the Council of Government, and will be meeting with them. Our first meeting, I believe, is February 7th that we will be meeting. There will be opportunities and information that is going to be presented with regard to parks, with regard to grants, with regard to proposal writing. I write. I'm a writer. I have always said that I will write or do what is necessary. We should not have to take our monies to fund this when there is money available through the county, through the state, through the government. We can do this. It can be done. So before taking those steps, talk with us, work with us, and give us the opportunity to do that which has to be done, that which needs to be done, and that which should be done for the town of Waxhaw. Because that, as a new board coming in, is what we are about, is doing the job at hand. Let us do that job. Tracy touched briefly on the library, and I will close with that. That was another one of my issues and topics. I need to see people, just as I see you here tonight, at next meeting, to come out and support the library. That library serves and supports so many in this town and around this town. That library is a vital function for the needs of many who do not have computers or need services or need training or need help or who are looking for jobs or need resumes or kids who are in school. We need our library to stay in Waxhaw. So let us fight for that library as you fought right now. Let us continue to fight and do what is right and do it the right way and let them hear our voices as we move forward. But let us do it in a constructive manner, in a civil manner, in a respectful manner, but in a manner that which allows our voices to be heard so that we can do what we need to do for our town moving forward. And let us come together as one Waxhaw, as we move forward through this year in doing what needs to be done. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Manager Ferguson. Okay, we're now into public hearings. Mr. Matt Hubert, public hearing for the floodplain damage prevention ordinance text amendment petition TA 006614-2017. I'll entertain a motion to open the public hearing. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Good evening, everybody. My name is, again, Matt Hubert. I'm the Assistant Town Engineer and the Floodplain Administrator. I'm sorry. Okay. I'm going to introduce TA 6614 to amend the flood damage prevention ordinance. Basically, what I found in administrating some of the current permits for floodplains, we found that the previous amendment to the regulations was misinterpreted when they actually made the revisions to the code. And so what they did was, the intent was to provide a freeboard or a factor of safety above the flood elevations of 2 feet for residential and 1 feet for commercial. But when they changed the regulations, they added the definition into regulatory flood protection elevation, as well as in the specific standards. So effectively, they doubled the requirement beyond what their intent was. So basically, this amendment seeks to correct that. One, by changing the definition or being clearer in the definition of regulatory flood protection elevation, so that it specifies exactly the freeboard that was expected. And also, in the specific standards, when you get into the details, not only does it clarify, but it takes that double definition of adding 2 feet above that already defined regulatory flood protection elevation. Basically, staff recommends approval of this. It feels that the proposed amendment is appropriate to the original intent of the 2013 amendment, and adoption of this ordinance language will permit us to apply the appropriate factor of freeboard to the development proposals to conform to the specific standards of the UDL. Previously, the Planning Board voted unanimously in favor of this amendment. Tonight's action would request we either approve the amendment or deny it.
We have no one signed up for comments. Commissioner Burrow, any questions?
No comments.
Commissioner Westlake, Commissioner Lee, Commissioner Burns? I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing then.
So
moved again by Commissioner Lee. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Hubert.
Thank you.
Next up, Ms. Small, public hearing for initial zoning of 2418 Providence Road South, petition RZ-006606-2017.
Down to my level. All right, good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, Commissioners. Again, tonight is the public hearing portion for the initial zoning request at 2418 Providence Road South. This petition, which is RZ-006606-2017, is a request by Tim Melton, who is the buyer joiner for the property, on behalf of Ms. Jennifer Mode. The request is for a general use town zoning map amendment, which again is an initial zoning from a property that's currently zoned Union County R40, single-family residential. The request is for Town of Waxhaw C3, General Commercial District, and this acre is 1.33 acres in size approximately. It's located just south of Southern Style Designs, and again, it's located at 2418 Providence Road South. Here's an aerial of the site. just showing, some of the abutting properties, which are mostly vacant in nature with pretty dense tracts of land. The current zoning, again, for this property is Union County R40. You'll notice that to the north is Southern Style Designs property, which is zoned CUC3, which is Conditional Use General Commercial District. To the east is a vacant property, which is also zoned CUC3, Conditional Use General Commercial District. To the south is the David Francis Tract, which is also zoned CUC3, Conditional Use General Commercial District. And to the west is a single-family residential property zoned Union County R40, which is single-family residential. According to the Union County Development Ordinance, R40, which is the subject property's current zoning, is primarily intended to accommodate low to moderate density single-family residential development, and the property is currently one single-family residential home. It was annexed into the town of Waxhaw on November 28, 2017. As I touched on briefly, the proposed rezoning request for this property is town of Waxhaw C3, which is consistent with the abutting property on 3 of its sides, which are also commercial in nature. The Highway 16 corridor plan shows the property as neighborhood mixed use, and the request of C3 General Commercial District for the property is consistent with the scattered commercial activity that's outlined in the general character of the neighborhood mixed use designation in the Highway 16 corridor plan. The future land use map from the 2016 Comprehensive Plan Policy Bridge shows the property as mixed use, with a subdesignation of G3 intended growth sector, and the G3 sector and subdesignation of mixed use are just described as follows briefly. G3 is for properties that are intended to be applied to areas that have ready access to transportation and utility infrastructure that can support larger scale and more intensive urban development patterns. And briefly, mixed use just provides for properties that have a mixture of commercial and residential uses in that area that are also located along major transportation routes that are strategically located to function as the center of a neighborhood. So the requested initial zoning is consistent with the plans for the future land use map for the town. With those facets in mind, staff recommends approval of the proposed initial zoning based on the comprehensive plan, the Highway 16 corridor plan, the future land use map, and the existing zoning that has been established on the abutting parcels as outlined. This zoning is a general zoning, initial zoning request to C3, and therefore no conditions can be placed on the approval. At the Monday, December 18th regular Planning Board meeting, the Planning Board voted unanimously with a vote of 5-0 to send a favorable recommendation to the Board of Commissioners on this petition. And the Planning Board also made a motion to make a favorable recommendation for the reasonableness and consistency statement that staff supported as outlined on the presentation here. With that, we would ask a motion for the Board of Commissioners to obviously close the public hearing with a subsequent request for a motion at the decision meeting to approve or deny the position as presented, with a subsequent motion to adopt one of the reasonableness and consistency statements as outlined in the staff report and in this presentation. And with that, I'll just be available for any questions. The applicant is also here to answer anything.
Does the applicant wish to say anything at this time?
Not unless the board has any questions for him.
Okay. All right, thank you. Commissioner Burrow?
No questions.
Commissioner Westlake?
I want to make sure that this is the best zoning for that location. I have some concerns about the amount of neighborhoods around it. I know that this property next to it's for sale. Are there any other zoning types that could be applied to this besides C3 that would make it less, or I should say more restrictive of what goes there?
Okay, no problem, Commissioner Westlake. So I'll just address, the full dais just so it's on the record. As outlined in a number of the town plans, this property is designated as mixed use, which means that in theory it could be consistent with a variety of residential and commercial zoning districts. That being said, with the prevalence of commercial properties in the area, staff is in support of the request of the applicant to request C3 for this property, particularly because on 3 of the sides there are commercial uses that have been established there. Further, I just wanted to outline that the request of C3 is one of the less impactful commercial zoning designations. If needed, I can, compact that a little bit more, but just generally speaking, it is one of the less intensive of the commercial zoning designations, so staff is in support of that request.
Okay, so if that area would be NMX, would it not be okay to go ahead and zone this parcel NMX, or what would be the difference with that?
So while the NMX zoning district would be consistent with a mixed-use future land use classification, there would be some differences in terms of setbacks, lot coverages, and things of that nature, coupled with the fact that there are no current NMX properties in this area. There may be some inconsistencies with that, and the C slew of zoning classifications would be more consistent with the abutting properties, which would be another factor that we'd look at when vetting consistency with the future land use map and the Highway 16 corridor plan.
Okay, so like an NMX would have require less landscape buffering along the street frontage, and whereas a C3 would allow it to sit back further. Is that the type of?
Not necessarily. No? There are a variety of nuances. So with regard to the buffering, that would really be contingent upon what the abutting properties are. Because on 3 of the sides there is an abutting commercial use, there would be less of a buffer needed on that side. But because, again, since most of the abutting properties are, I know they have conditions, but C3 in use, it would be the most consistent between the two. There are some, more nuanced differences in terms of like setbacks and lot coverage for the two. So I definitely understand your question in terms of would it also be appropriate, but based off of the existing conditions of the abutting properties, I think that C3 would be the most appropriate of the two.
That's all I have.
Thank you. Commissioner Lee?
Make sure I'm on here. Now, the surrounding properties on at least 3 sides are CU C3, is that correct?
Correct.
Why can this site, why is it recommended C3 as opposed to CU C3?
Sure. So for a by right zoning, which this is, this is an initial zoning request for a property that was recently annexed. When something is annexed into the town, zoning has to be established within 60 days. Or there's no zoning on the site, just some context for the audience as well. Conditions cannot be imposed upon the rezoning request unless the applicant agrees to it, and the applicant and staff were in support of the rezoning as requested, in which the applicant did not propose conditions for this site.
Did anyone ask? Or do we just, let me rephrase that. Did the applicant came forward and suggested C3?
The applicant expressed an interest in having a commercial designation with that in mind, which staff supported, correct?
Did anyone broach the topic or discuss having conditional zoning?
Staff outlined that there were some CUC3 properties abutting, but unless the request is from the applicant in terms of support for the conditions, staff does not make that leap, no.
Okay, so staff would not have come
the
forward
authority
and broached that option to the
unless there was an expressed interest.
Unless the applicant brings it up first.
Unless the applicant had a specific set of conditions that they wanted to impose upon the property.
Okay. Thank you.
Just to, be clear on that, Commissioner Lee, so while staff would have been able to support that initiative, that is something that is to be at the request of the applicant specifically.
Commissioner Burns?
I have a question on if this property were zoned NMX, under the uses for NMX versus C3, would that be less impactful to the development as far as the density of what goes in there, or traffic safety, or?
Sure, Commissioner Burns. So in general, I'd find that, and there might be some nuances depending on a particular use when we get to that stage of development, but in general, the allowed uses and the different factors of that are consistent with each other. So since NMX, neighborhood mixed use, looks at a variety of land uses, a mixture of things, they are generally consistent with this level of commercial development for C3.
C3, I don't have the list of uses in front of me, I wish I did. But anyway, C3 would allow a store, a gas station, correct? NMX would not, correct?
Generally, Commissioner Burns, there are some, for C3 and for NMX, there are a variety of by right uses, and then there are a number of them that also have supplemental regulations. So there would be, depending on which of the two you looked at, some more stringent conditions depending on what particular use was looked at. But generally, for a wealth of general commercial uses, many things would be allowed in both of the two districts.
Thank you.
Just a point of clarity, a service station would, an automobile service station, which is what a gas station, that would be with conditions on it, correct, under C3?
Yes, so there would be some supplemental regulations that would be required. And just as a point of clarity, I know Commissioner Burns was mentioning this, it is explained a little bit, more thoroughly in the table of uses if someone were interested in a particular type of use, correct?
Yes, there's a lot of discussion about the conditional use we no longer allow, but conditional use permit, the CUC3, we do have the conditional zoning, and that process takes months, I think about 4 to 6 months. So we can't do it to comply with the 60-day requirement. And then second, with the NMX, we have zoned it outside of the downtown code area, but most of the time it has been in proximity to the downtown code area because the densities and the traffic patterns and a lot of the alignments were designed for downtown code, and NMX is part of the downtown code. So what you would normally do if you want to be a little bit more restrictive is maybe look at a C2 or a C1 or an OIS, one of the more traditional zoning classifications that's in our traditional code versus the downtown code. It just may be a hard mix, and then you still look at your surrounding areas and consistency and what you want, but that may be another approach.
Okay, so that's kind of what I was.
Hang on a second.
Oh, sorry.
Commissioner Burns, did you get your question completely answered? Okay. Let's let her go, and then we'll come back, okay? Mayor Pro Tem.
Well, actually, I was going to say something similar to what Attorney Chaplin did state regarding the NMX use with working with the planning board, that it is something that is more in the downtown area than in this area. However, when the applicant did come to you, just for clarity and maybe board's clarity, you do go over the CU3, the C3 information with that applicant, but you are presenting based upon what the applicant has requested, which is the C3 option.
Correct. So during the process, we go into a little bit of detail about the surrounding and abutting zoning classifications. There's often the question of, what does the CU mean, as we've all kind of unpacked a little bit further today. But ultimately, that is the applicant's decision.
Yes.
Commissioner Westlake.
Well, I guess that was kind of going back to my question. I know that because this was annexed in, we have to assign a zoning for it. So even though the applicant asked for the C3, are we able to set a different zoning than what's requested? I guess it's, since you were talking about the C1, C2.
Yes, it's up to this board's discretion on the zoning classification. So you can.
And the land use plan, I think it was, you said is NMX in this area, even though that's not.
Let me recognize Dennis Rory.
Yeah, Dennis Rory, Development Services Director, Town Engineer. Kind of a couple things going on. One, the board ultimately will get a chance to decide what initial zoning district is appropriate. At the staff level, we make a recommendation after working with the applicant on what we think their desired zoning district may be initially in a case like this, and we benchmark that against things like the future land use map and our understanding of growth patterns and what's happening adjacent to the property. And so from that kind of synthesis of information, or from that information, we kind of come out with an output recommendation on what we think makes sense. And so that's what we're doing tonight. Now, again, if there is a zoning district that is different, that the board thinks makes more sense for whatever reason, the board clearly has that authority to make that decision. I would just reiterate Lindsay's point earlier. If there's something in C3, albeit a use or a series of uses that you have questions on, you may want to benchmark that against the different zoning districts that you're thinking about and what's allowed in those zoning districts, because you may find that there's similar uses allowed in different zoning districts. However, supplemental regulations may come with different zoning districts that you choose. So it's not necessarily a linear process. It's very iterative. And so what we're doing, again, is trying to make staff recommendations that benchmark what we think the applicant's needs are versus what we think the town's future growth direction is, as we can define it usually or primarily in our future land use map and comprehensive plan, things of that nature. So just wanted to offer that perspective.
Thank you. Any additional questions?
I don't know why I'm having a hard time with this, but I guess I'm so bothered by all the residential around it and the fact that there's an R40 right next to it that's Union County and not Waxhaw. And I just want to make sure that we have the best zoning for transitional from residential to commercial. You know, it's a very small parcel, so it's kind of, you know, tricky as far as planning for that whole area, but that's just where my concerns are coming from. I don't know if anybody else has those same.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, the R40 parcel is currently, maybe a single-family house on that, if I'm not mistaken.
But it's for sale. The land is for sale.
So I would just caution you with looking at the existing zoning district on that R4 parcel and making any sort of transitions and thinking that it's where it's going to stay. I think ultimately the market will put pressure on what that R40 zoning district will be or should be, and whether it goes through a county rezoning process if someone were to acquire the parcel and choose to rezone it, or if it were to go through a town process. I think the market is going to start to really speak on what the appropriate zoning district is to yield the highest and best use for that piece of property, and then whichever board that looks at that piece of property from a land use perspective in a decision-making framework will ultimately have to decide if that's appropriate or not. But again, the cautionary note for me is R40, as you see it on the map, may not be R40 6 months from now.
Do you have any perspective as to what Union County's future zoning map future land use map shows along the corridor in that area?
I would need to kind of reevaluate that, and then certainly can provide that information in the form of an email or some documentation through the manager, so you all can see
that'd be great
comprehensively what Union County's thinking. I will say this, though, Mr. Mayor, that one thing that's on the county's mind, certainly is on our mind at a staff level, is Highway 16 and it being a pretty significant vehicular corridor. And so I don't want to speak for the county by any means, but I do think that they're looking at land uses through the lens of how does it interface, or how these land uses interface with the commercial corridor like Highway 16.
That's a very good point. Any other questions? Not, I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, next up is a quasi-judicial public hearing for the Millbridge Phase 7D Major CUP Amendment Petition CU 06546-2017. At this time, will the clerk swear in all those that plan to present to the board? And that would include the applicant as well. Or Okay, I'll entertain a motion to open the quasi judicial hearing.
So moved.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Attorney Spencer.
Quick explanation. This is one of the rare ones that we have. It is quasi-judicial. We just had the witnesses be sworn in. So quasi-judicial is kind of like a court hearing. You must make your decision based upon evidence presented by witnesses under oath. And another part of that is you have to be fair and impartial. You have to come in with no fixed opinion on this decision. And you also must disclose any what we call ex parte communication. And ex parte is it's got to be Latin, of communication outside of this hearing, outside of this building. And it's got to be material and germane to the hearing. So I'm going to ask you, and if we could just go by, and I'm going to say it one time, and if each of y'all could affirm for the record. Can each of you be fair and impartial and base your decision upon the matters presented during the public hearing?
Yes.
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 Each answered in the affirmative. And do any of you have any ex parte communication regarding this hearing that needs to be disclosed? And if so, please disclose it. So do any of you have any ex parte communications?
No.
No.
Thank you. I have nothing further.
Thank you. Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Board. Can everyone hear me? This is a major conditional use permit amendment request to the existing conditional use permit, Millbridge subdivision phase 7D. The proposal is for 72 detached single-family dwellings on 30.84 acres. The applicant is proposing to revise the approved layout but keep the remaining previously approved CUP conditions. The property is located in the southwest corner of Millbridge at the southern end of the Millbridge Parkway and adjacent to the North Carolina-South Carolina state line. Up here is the zoning map. The property is zoned CU R4 PRD, which is conditional use single-family planned residential development. Currently, the subject property is an undeveloped area in the Millbridge development that was approved for approximately 79 single-family dwelling units. To the north, Millbridge Phase 7B will be along Britannia Boulevard. It's currently under construction. It's part of the approved CUP. This property is zoned CU R4 PRD. To the south, Millbridge property is vacant and also within the approved CUP. This property is also zoned CU R4 PRD. To the east is the undeveloped Millbridge phases 7A and 7C. Both phases 7A and 7C are zoned CU R4 PRD and are part of the approved CUP. There is also a vacant parcel zoned CU R3, conditional use single-family residential, and that's in the triangle lot portion there. And to the west is the North Carolina-South Carolina state line and Walnut Creek subdivision in South Carolina. For the future land use map, the requested CUP amendment is detached, single-family, that's consistent with the G3 intended growth sector, residential mixed, as shown on the future land use plan and the comprehensive plan policy bridge document. The site plan on the right is the original Millbridge 2004 approved plan. There have been some revisions and additions since, but this shows the location of the proposed Phase 7D area
bottom southern portion there. So the inset map to the left shows an enlargement of the original Phase 7D area. Now to look at previously approved acreage and number of lots. The table shows the previous CUP totals, and the table also compares the approved lot total with the total lots with Phase 7D. Number of lots originally approved is at 2,090 lots total. Currently approved for construction, the total is at 1,750, and Phase 7D would add 72 lots, and that would keep the total still under the approved amount. So the applicant is requesting a major conditional use permit amendment to construct the next phase of single-family homes in the area. The proposed phase is to be developed in accordance with the approved CUP conditions with the following exceptions. And this is what triggered the major amendment. The interior layout of streets changed from the 2004 plan. The elimination of Millbridge Parkway corridor and connection to Highway 75 due to CSX denial of an additional crossing at the railroad, and new amenity area with facilities and parking. The 2004 approved plan and the currently proposed amendment to the plan are shown here. On the screen you see where previously with the opening to 75, the Millbridge Parkway flowed through and was allowed to connect, and now that it's not allowed to connect, it has to now terminate somewhere. And so flow of traffic now is being looked at through Torrey Path Road, which was in the original plan also. So as for transportation and connectivity, the loss of Highway 75 connection to Millbridge results in several issues. Mainly the increase in emergency response time that we heard from our emergency response folks. It'll result in things like increase in vehicle miles traveled, could impact air quality, convenience to residents, services from the town could be reduced, and just an overall impact on quality of life. So for the planning staff recommendation, staff recommends approval of the major amendment with a condition to open Torrey Path Road. The proposed condition will mitigate the negative impacts of being denied the crossing on Highway 75. Our approval is based on this major CUP amendment being in keeping with the comprehensive plan policy bridge. The applicant is proposing to open Torrey Path, addressing safety concerns for emergency vehicles and community connectivity. Planning Board recommendation. At the December 18th, 2017 meeting, the Planning Board voted unanimously to send a favorable recommendation with the condition that zoning construction permits are contingent upon completion of improvements to open Torrey Path Road to meet NCDOT requirements, and also with consideration that the notes portion of the application or this packet of information that you received in the staff report is not in conflict with the UDO or any other ordinances consistent with the approvals from Millbridge. At the same time, at the Planning Board meeting, they voted unanimously to recommend this reasonable and consistency statement. When it comes up for time to to vote on this matter. For the conditional use permit, the Board of Commissioners may attach fair and reasonable conditions to the approval. The petitioner will have a reasonable opportunity to consider and respond to any additional requirements prior to approval or denial by the Board of Commissioners. The request for tonight is to close the hearing. And the requested motion at the next board meeting would be, of course, to approve or deny or apply the conditions there as the third or that second option. And then at that point, you would also look at the reasonableness and consistency statement. Also, after the planning board meeting previously, I finished with my first part of the presentation, but we received an email to clarify something after the planning board meeting. So we've passed out a copy of that email, and I don't know if Weston wants to speak to that, to offer that email up.
Good afternoon, Board and Mayor. During the planning board meeting, there was...
Would you state your name just for the record?
Yes. My name is Weston Bowles. I'm with W.K. Dixon, the civil engineer on the project.
Thank you.
During the planning board meeting, there were some discussions about the right-of-way widths, and we said that we're going to be keeping with the right-of-way width that is currently out there. Due to the town adopting new construction standards, the actual width of the right-of-way is going to increase by a foot. So we wanted to clarify that so that we weren't misleading anybody. Also, that there were some questions about setbacks and how they would, if there are any changes about that to the planning board, or the planning board is kind of asking it. And just to clarify that, we're keeping with all the Millbridge current setback requirements. I think that's all.
Thank you. Do you have a question? Commissioner Burrow.
I have 4 questions. 2 are simple, 2 are a little more complicated. The first one is, during your presentation, you mentioned that there had been an impact by the amenity area. Would you elaborate on that a little bit, please?
Oh, well, the only impact was it's a change in the CUP. So it's a significant, since it involves parking lots, facilities, it's part of the items that trigger the major amendment. So that's the only issue. It's really a benefit to the southern portion of Millbridge.
Okay. The next is, it's not really a question, it's just to ask for an affirmation. Right now, the maximum number of lots is 2,090, and we're at 1,800 and something now. With the development that's left to go in Millbridge, we cannot at this time exceed 2,090. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right, thank you. The a little more complicated, when you mention that one whole list of concerns, how does Torrey Path mitigate those concerns in your mind, making it an access through Torrey Path?
Well, from a planning transportation point of view and our connectivity that we wish for communities, that's an issue. But the big thing is the information we received from, especially like fire response. It was going to, with Torrey Path being closed, they stated that it was going to be possibly more than double the response time to make their way through Millbridge to respond to somebody in this area of the neighborhood.
Okay. Is there, in all of this, are these disadvantages going to exist? Is there any way to mitigate any of those?
With the condition of Torrey Path being open, this will be mitigated. Torrey
Path being open to 75 or to Millbridge?
It will be opened from the crossing at 75 Torrey Path up to and into Millbridge. It's currently closed.
For the response time, I believe the fire marshal has stated that the response time would be greatly reduced with having the access to, from Torrey Path to 75 and being able to have emergency response that way.
Is there any knowledge of whether, I know at one point CSX also proposed closing Torrey Path. Where are we on that? Is Torrey, in other words, I got to ask it differently. Are we sure Torrey Path will be available to help us?
We need to have you sworn in. Okay, Mr. Rory.
All right. Again, Dennis Rory, Development Services Director, Town Engineer. I don't want to confuse the issue, but Torrey Path and kind of the amount of moving parts with the rail, it's extremely dynamic. It involves obviously CSX, the NC Rail Division in Raleigh, and clearly locally the town, the county, and Landover, the developer for Millbridge. So the latest feedback that I had gotten from the rail division was that they were looking at different connections that would allow for Torrey Path to either stay open in its current configuration or be relocated to a different location, but also remain open and maintain access to either Helms Road or directly to 75. So it's not quite as black and white as it's open where it is from now on. Their intent at the last meeting that I was in with them was to keep that connection available, whether it's in its current location or in a slightly modified configuration. Some of that information should become available as we move through the state's funding process for large capital projects, largely because the rail division would have to submit a project of that magnitude, a project meaning one that would involve possibly relocating Torrey Path and looking for alternative connections. They would have to submit that scale of project to that particular funding program, and so once it's there, there becomes a lot of information available for folks to look at and look through and ask, whatever kind of technical questions they may have about it.
Okay, thank you. I guess my point is, and you've made it, there are many conditions here that are not, or many variables that are not in our control.
That's correct.
If we assume they all turn out beautifully, great. If they all turn out badly, what do we do then? Is there some kind of option or options that we could explore to deal with the downgrading of, I don't want to call it downgrading, but the increase in emergency response times and so forth without considering Torrey Path or those other variables?
Yeah, I would argue that these are some of those alternatives and options. If we were to go back to where the conversation started with the rail division, and CSX was a part of that conversation, it was, hey, by the way, we intend to close this connection, just wanted to give you a heads up. Right. And so that's a pretty tough position to start from, and so we've spent the better part of a year and a half now getting to what I'll call a current position, or at least as current as the last meeting I was in, of, hey, we the rail division, CSX, recognize the importance of that connection, in particular as it relates to a Millbridge requirement that they have from the original CUP to connect to Torrey Path. And so the emergency response times and other variables that Tim brought up earlier were really our attempt to give feedback to those entities that this is how important keeping this connection open is to us. And so we're willing to work with you if that means maybe relocating that connection and looking for somewhere where the grades are a little bit better to get over the rail, things of that nature. But if it means terminating it or closing the connection, that was not at all what we were interested in. So I would just say that where we are right now does indeed represent a pretty positive step from where we started the dialogue, or at least where the dialogue was started, because we didn't actually initiate the dialogue. So hopefully that's helpful. Just one piece of clarity from an earlier question, maybe Weston can speak to this. I believe the amenity center piece, I think with this particular request there, the developer is planning to put in a new or an additional amenity center, additional to the one that's already out there. So I don't think there's any sort of impact to the existing amenity center so much as where they are they're planning to put a new one on site, and they're trying to design this particular phase of the site to account for that, and that level of change or addition requires this action that is in front of you, or these series of actions.
Thank you all very much.
Sure.
Just,
yes, sir.
Mr. Roy, just one clarification question.
Sir.
Regarding Torrey Path.
Yes, sir.
Construction permits are not issued until that's open. Contingent upon the completion of the improvements to open Torrey Path, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And to your question, what he was stating on the amenity center, the developer is proposing the amenity center due to the current residents requesting more amenities, so that's where that's coming from.
Thank you.
Commissioner Westlake.
So the construction permits include homes and the amenity center, as far as no permits would be allowed until this is done, and that includes for both the amenity center and homes? Is that what we're talking about in construction permits? Okay.
Yeah, for the whole development.
Okay. What is the, and I don't know, Dennis, you may need to step back up here, but what is the current status of the intersection of Kensington and Waxhaw Marvin Road that Millbridge is supposed to be improving?
Sure. The current status, and this is current as of, I believe, Friday of last week, so it's pretty current. The plans, the construction plans for that intersection have been approved by NCDOT. There's a long history, but this is kind of the condensed version, but they were recently approved by NCDOT. So the developer has put together a schedule that now that they have approval and pending some right-of-way negotiations, they believe that they could have construction of that intersection done within the next, I believe, 7 to 8 months, maybe 8 to 9. I can get you the actual number. I don't want to misquote them, but it's certainly this calendar year is their plan to complete those intersection improvements. I will caution you, as I did on a different item, when we're talking about right-of-way and right-of-way needs, that certainly can have a real schedule impact that could be largely outside of anyone's control other than the person that is having to provide the right-of-way, quite frankly. So as much as I'm quoting you a schedule now, once the developer starts to try to acquire right-of-way, that can have an impact to the schedule. It usually extends it, quite frankly, but hopefully that won't be the case in this particular situation.
Okay. So, and if we do not approve this amendment, then they can go ahead and just start building the homes because that's already approved, the plan. So that has, what impact does that have on the Torrey Path?
So, yeah, they're currently entitled to develop their site and build on their site, but they are entitled to build it under the previous the design configuration that Tim provided to you. It was in color, I think, if I can back up enough. Yeah, so they're currently entitled to do this right now. And so largely what they're asking for with the current proposal is a reconfiguration of how this particular phase gets designed and ultimately constructed. And so to your question or comments about Waxhaw, Marvin, and Kensington, if we take the conversation that we're having right now about Phase 7D off the table right now, they still have the requirement for Waxhaw, Marvin, and Kensington, and my understanding and expectation is they're still moving on the schedule that they provided to me as recent as last Friday.
Point of clarification.
Sir.
If we didn't approve this, they could build under the existing, and we would not have any emergency service access out the back end. That's the critical nature of this because the parkway's been eliminated? This gives them the ability to make with the Torrey Path connection.
It certainly helps that, and I would just, if you would focus on the map for just a second, I question maybe the feasibility of them being able to design a road around this particular water feature. And also, my understanding is that, and Tim referenced it earlier, I think that they were required to abandon a connection that they had to 75 that they would have connected this particular road to that connection that they abandoned. And so the net effect is if they developed under the current plan, they would most likely have to stub this street somewhere and would not get the connection back through 75. So somewhat long-winded answer to say yes to your question, but I thought it needed maybe a little bit additional context to help everybody see what's going on.
We also, in the review of the adjacent project for 7A, B, and C, it was noted in the review of the plans, it was also conditional use permit, but during the construction review, it was footnoted because Torrey Path was open on the original plan, and so they footnoted as long as it works out with NCDOT that Torrey Path would remain open. So I don't know if that is kind of the thing that would stick with this project also when we got to construction review, is even if they build it under that current plan, that would still come up that Torrey Path is still not open, and it would hold up things. So.
Commissioner Lee? Commissioner Burns?
I have a couple of questions. You said that NCDOT could start within 7 or 8 months in the improvements to the intersection. So that would be August of this year.
So the intersection that we're talking about is Waxhaw, Marvin, and Kensington,
right.
Correct? So Landover would actually be doing that work, not NCDOT.
Okay.
So that's land. NCDOT had to approve it because that intersection, 2 legs of that intersection are along state-maintained road.
Okay, what are the improvements? What's included in the improvements as far as that intersection?
I know that there's southbound left turn lane on Waxhaw Marvin onto Kensington. If I'm not mistaken, there's a northbound right turn lane on Waxhaw Marvin at Kensington, and there may be an additional left turn lane that I'm missing, but we actually have, we have a graphic that can show you exactly what those improvements are. I would just note that intersection, though, that there are other entities that have development responsibility.
That was my next question.
At that intersection, so a part of the schedule that they, Landover provided for me was to account for some of the time that they would need to also firm up those commitments with the different entities that are involved and have any sort of commitments at that intersection as well.
Who are those entities?
I think the church that's on the northwest corner of the intersection, or a little bit west of the intersection, has some phase 2 commitments, if I'm not mistaken, at that intersection that were identified in a traffic study, and so.
So it's Landover, St. Matt's, and Waxhaw, or just those 2?
I believe it's just those 2.
Could you come back to us in the next meeting and just give us a full update? So.
Just on that intersection?
Well, on the intersection, so we have all the pertinent facts on that, yeah.
Sure.
And last question is the turn lane. You said there would be a possible additional turn lanes. Is that an additional turn lane going west and east and west, turning on to?
I think, I mean, I can provide that.
Okay.
What
That'll
the
show
mayor's
all of that.
asking for. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'd like to see that.
Sure.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any further questions? If not, I will, we need to, Mr. Jones, you need to enter into evidence both the petition and the presentation, petition packet and presentation.
Just so submitted. It just needs to come from you, and they can accept it.
The packet.
Yes, the packet, the petition and the presentation, you'd like to submit those into evidence?
I would like to submit the packet and the presentation into evidence.
Thank you. Strange quasi-judicial.
Thanks for the help.
Thank you very much. And with that, I will entertain a motion to close the quasi-judicial hearing.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Tim, but don't go too far. All right, we're up to new business now. Main Street Station subdivision petition 006-634-2017. Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Board. It's been a while since I've seen you last. Okay. This is a request by Bryant Spencer on behalf of RHH Investors, LLC, for a preliminary subdivision plan on approximately 19.024 acres located off Waxhaw Highway. The proposed subdivision will contain 117 single-family attached dwelling units. The property is located on the north side of Waxhaw Highway and adjacent to the American Legion Post 208 property. The property for the development was rezoned from C2 Highway Commercial to NMX Neighborhood Mixed Use on June 27th, 2017. The adjoining properties to the north, there's a railway line along the entire north property line, and across from that, Wesley Chapel AME Zion Church and homes zoned R4, single-family residential, and property zoned CU C1, conditional use neighborhood business. To the east, there's a Union County property zoned R20, residential 20. To the south, there's Hermitage Place subdivision and several individual properties zoned R4, single-family residential. Union County property zoned B4, general commercial, and properties zoned OIS, office, institutional, and specialty use. The Union County area shown above on the map as B2, but should be B4. There's some GIS discrepancy there. To the west is the American Legion Post 208 and First Baptist Church properties zoned NMX, neighborhood mixed use, and a property zoned TC for town center. The proposed subdivision is in keeping with the future land use designation of G3 mixed use, providing for a mixture of housing types, including townhomes or single-family attached dwellings. This is a preliminary subdivision plan with an inset showing the extension of the property to the east. The proposed subdivision is consistent with the downtown vision plan since the NMX and UN districts call for townhouses in this area. important transportation notes are noted here. They have 2 points of ingress and egress provided. There's a Carolina thread trail that they've integrated into a portion of their development with the 20-foot easement and 6-foot paved trail. There's connectivity with a street stub on the west side of the property. There's sidewalks along Waxhaw Highway and on both sides of the interior roads. All street cross sections are to be reviewed during the construction document phase. All single-family attached buildings will be rear-loaded and alley-fed. So there's some alleyways provided on the interior. The proposed recreation space of 6.5% is over the 2% minimum required. The elevations provided in just a moment are conceptual, and actual elevation designs will be submitted for the construction plan review process. We recently received some updated elevations that I placed on the desk and is reflected in the following images. The new images remove the front-loaded garages that were shown during the planning board meeting. This is the example of a 5-unit townhouse building concept with the front entrance and garages in the rear. This is a single-story example of one of their 4-unit attached buildings. And again, these elements will be reviewed during the construction document process. All street cross sections will be reviewed, as mentioned, during the construction document process. The applicant has revised the cross sections to provide a minimum 5-foot planting strip. That was one of the previous comments that staff made. Planning staff recommendation offers approval of this petition based on consistency with the UDO requirements, comprehensive plan policy bridge document, future land use plan map designation, and the downtown vision plan. This is a general subdivision request, so no conditions can be placed on the approval. For the planning board recommendation, at the December 18th meeting, they voted unanimously to send a favorable recommendation to the Board of Commissioners. So the motion is to approve or to deny the petition for Main Street Station.
Commissioner Burrow, questions?
No, I have no questions, but just a clarification, if you would, perhaps for folks here. This is a subdivision request, not a zoning request. Correct. And that's they are distinctly different, and that's one of the reasons there are no conditional uses that can be applied.
Yes, they've already gone through the rezoning, and it was a by right NMX for downtown.
Correct. Thank you.
Commissioner Westlake?
Do we still have a liaison with the school board? As far as when we approve subdivisions, finding out just kind of what their situation is with facilities, things like that?
So, Tim or Dennis, you could probably better explain this, but when you go through the technical review, my understanding is the school, UCPS, is involved in all technical reviews and has been for years with anything we do. Yes.
So they're aware of
Yep.
117 more units, and they've included that maybe in, because I know they're going through a whole redistricting, remapping thing, so, I know the schools in that area, are affected. I just wanted to make sure that we have communication with the school board on things that are happening.
The thing I did not offer up is that their intention is for this to be age
appropriate.
Age appropriate. So.
Okay, so it's more active adult type, you're thinking, okay.
Yes.
But it's not a restricted community, it's just age appropriate. Yeah.
Yes.
So that doesn't have specific covenants or anything like that. So. Commissioner Lee? Commissioner Burns?
I just have a question, general question. In that area, is the speed limit 45 or 55? And is there any plans for a traffic signal there?
Speed limit is 45
Okay.
by the time you come around the American Legion there. And we have discussions, nothing's firm, but we support going to them and discussing a reduction in that speed limit, since we're kind of expanding to our future plans with the future land use, and in doing that, we're extending our downtown down that area as the future plans. So in order to put stoops and sidewalks along that area, the town mentioned we would support going, the process of going towards NCDOT to request that.
Is there any further discussion about that 3-point there that's right near where one goes? There's 3-point roads there. Because of this traffic, it seems like it would be coming right into there to go right, left, or straight.
I am not familiar with the plans for that intersection.
Thank you.
So to follow up on Commissioner Burns' question, being that that is a 3-point intersection with the heavy traffic, is that something that you will be followed up on or should be followed up on before the building of a community such as this?
We discussed in the initial conversations with the applicant before they submitted, we had discussions with them on what would result in a transportation study, and their levels of units didn't trip the mechanism that requires a TIP or a TIA, traffic impact analysis. So a bigger development might trip such a thing, but we did have discussions with them on that.
Have they gotten far enough to where they have reviewed any driveway and road impacts with DOT? Is DOT required to weigh in as they build their construction plans?
They are having, yes, they've been discussing their entrances.
So and that's where some of the questions that we have can be inserted into the discussion.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, any other questions? What do we want to do with it?
I would make the motion to approve petition SUB 006634-2017, Main Street Station.
And you're doing that based upon the consistency with the UDO requirements, the comprehensive plan policy bridge document, and the future land use plan?
Correct.
Okay. All right, we have a motion to approve. Further discussion? Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Ayes have it, 5-0. Thank you very much. Okay, next up, Mr. Rory, Waxhaw Marvin Road Corridor Study Contract and Project Ordinance.
Yeah, there we go.
Dennis, would you mind if we took a 5-minute recess here?
By all means.
Okay, thank you.
variance request?
Mr. Mayor, Board, this next item that's in front of you is really a three-part request. It's a contract request for the town to enter into a contract with a transportation planning and design consultant for Waxhaw Marvin Road corridor study. If approved, kind of two subsequent actions would need to occur. One's a motion to approve a grant project fund ordinance, which, if approved, would allow for the town to accept grant funds, place them more or less in their own project account, and then, since this contract, if approved, would involve expenditures over multiple fiscal years, there's a requirement for a capital budget ordinance to be adopted for this particular grant as well. So those are just an explanation or a backstory on the three different kind of motions or requests in front of you for this one item. I did put together a very brief presentation to just provide a little bit of, we'll call it, technical context of what the Waxhaw Marvin Road corridor study is. Happy to answer any questions you have, certainly the technical ones, and any of the questions that you have about any of the motions. Do have Brady Finkley with Kimley Horn. He is behind me to my right. You'll find out later, you can find out actually now and see it later in the presentation, that Kimley Horn was the transportation planning and design consultant selected for this particular corridor study, and so Brady is here just to answer any questions about Kimley Horn if you have any of those type questions that may come up later in the presentation. But I will move through the presentation fairly quickly. Stop me at any point if you have any questions. Really, it's three things we'll cover. Just an overview of what is this corridor study, where did it come from, a little bit about how to fund it, and then I'll talk a little bit about the consultant selection process so you have a better understanding of how we, as a staff, arrived at a recommendation and actually selection of Kimley Horn as our preferred design professional or planning professional in this context. So, little tough to read, unfortunately, with the white on white background, but the graphic in front of you, and you have handouts at your actual desk that represent the total grant application that was sent over to the Charlotte Regional Transportation Planning Organization, CRTPO, who is actually the entity that is approving this grant. But that graphic in your packet's a little bit easier to read. In any event, what's on the screen is really just it's a map of Waxhaw and quite frankly a lot of Western Union County, and the two lines, or the two most visible lines, a green line and a red line, part of which is solid and some of it's dashed, the green line represents Highway 16, the red line represents various alignments of Waxhaw Marvin Road. It may change names a bit as you move farther north above Marvin, but I think this illustrates the point. And the point being, you have two, in Waxhaw, you have two, what I'll say, very good routes, and good is subjective, I understand that, to move from north to south throughout the town, and to mainly the northern employment centers that a lot of folks are commuting to in the mornings. That's Highway 16, and that's Waxhaw Marvin. Now, I don't want to mislead anybody. There are other ways to get north and south, but these are the two most direct, and I would argue the two most traveled. 521 clearly is another route. However, or not however, but along those lines of thinking, Highway 16 has received a lot of attention. It's received a lot of attention over time. It's recently receiving even more attention as the state has announced months ago. It's a fully funded project. They're accelerating the construction of that project, and so Highway 16 is pretty well spoken for in terms of what, how it will be addressed, not necessarily to all the details, but at least the entity that will do the heavy lifting, and that's NCDOT. We understand and we all know that it will involve some level of widening. We don't know all of the design details yet, and as we know more, we'll share more, but overall, we understand that's a large widening project. It's going to take a number of years. several years ago, you probably would have heard of this through a larger umbrella of a comprehensive growth management plan or growth management strategy. But that's kind of the impetus of what initiated us looking at, well, what about Waxhaw Marvin? If we're focusing all on Highway 16, are we taking focus off of Waxhaw Marvin? And what I mean by focus is Waxhaw Marvin is primarily a two-lane road, and there's turn lanes at major intersections for the most part, but comprehensively, what do we think the best cross-section for Waxhaw Marvin should be to accommodate the various demands that are already on it? Cars are on it. There is a pedestrian demand, so the sidewalk network is not a comprehensive sidewalk network by any means. So how do we accommodate the pedestrian? How do we accommodate cyclists who have a need and demand for road space as well? And how do we do all those things? And quite frankly, not just how, but what should we do? And so one of the best ways to start to answer the how and what questions are to do what's called a corridor study, a transportation corridor study. And so every year, as a part of the CRTPO's annual work plan, which is called the Unified Planning Work Program, or UPWP, they solicit feedback or requests for projects for the different participating municipalities that make up that CRTPO. We happen to be one of those participating municipalities. And so in the fall of 2016, there was a call for projects for the FY18 UPWP. We put together a grant application that you all have in front of you and submitted that to the CRTPO in January of 2017. Excuse me. As you can see by the date on the cover page of the FY 2018 UPWP, March 15th of 2017 would represent the date at which the CRTPO Policy Board, at the time, Mayor Maher and former Commissioner Warner were our representatives. Clearly, that will change with the upcoming composition of the Policy Board, but that was our kind of Policy Board representation on this larger kind of regional Policy Board. And that larger group voted to approve the 2018 UPWP, which included in it $62,500 grant allocation for the Waxhaw Marvin Road corridor study. Of that $62,500, $50,000 of that would be paid for by the CRTPO. It's reimbursable, so we would certainly have to have the full $62,500, but $50,000 of it would be reimbursed by CRTPO. $12,500 would be the town match requirement. So this was a way in which we identified at a pretty significantly reduced cost a way to answer some of the how and what questions for how to accommodate the various users on Waxhaw Marvin Road. Again, Highway 16 had a lot of attention it was spoken for. This was a way to get some attention on the Waxhaw Marvin Road, but do it in a manner that, quite frankly, used the CRTPO's funding commitment to serve as the lion's share of the financial commitment to get this work up and off the ground. So this is just an explanation, at least a visual depiction of the explanation that I just gave you. All it really is our explanation of the grant request in the actual UPWP document for the CRTPO. So again, just going back real quickly to timeline, March 15th of 2017, the UPWP was approved. Town, we issued a RFP in June of 2017. Between June and 2017 and I will say October, we had 4 design professionals or planning professionals rather submit for that RFP. There is a selection criteria that involve members of town staff, NCDOT, CRTPO on that selection committee. The three different entities unanimously recommended Kimley Horn as the preferred professional for this RFP, and so between that kind of October time frame and maybe early December, maybe even late November, there was a lot of dialogue with working out different details that NCDOT needed before we could get to a point to where we could present a contract to the board. And so that's kind of the chronology and where we are and how we got there. But I do want to point out that this particular corridor study, it isn't tied to any sort of development proposal that's in front of us or that we think will be in front of us. It's really trying to be forward-looking in how we handle Waxhaw Marvin Road corridor. I think there's been a lot of dialogue, whether it's been tonight or over the series of meetings that I've been at here about smart growth management, responsible management of that growth. I would argue that one of the ways in which you can be responsible with how you handle the transportation issues, some of those issues maybe haven't even popped up yet on this road, is to get out ahead of it through something like a corridor study and identify maybe areas where there could be better pedestrian crossings, there could be better cyclist accommodations, maybe the laneage needs to be something other than what it is today. And so I think this is one of the best tools that we have at our disposal to get out ahead of some of the things that could come online in the future. And I'm not suggesting near future, I'm suggesting, quite frankly, long-term future. So just wanted to add that bit of editorial. And I left this graphic in here kind of on what I'll call the question slide, because this is location, quite frankly, that is, in my opinion, quite ripe for a pedestrian crossing. And I think that something like a corridor study can kind of help evaluate that location and give us some level of feedback of what are ways in which we can cross pedestrians at this location. It may seem obvious to some folks, just like, well, just put a crosswalk down. Well, I can tell you that on a road that's, I think, posted at maybe 45, that's not something I would recommend. And so you have to look at different kind of tools in the toolbox to try to make that crossing, if any, the most comfortable crossing and clearly the safest crossing that we could come up with. So that's just an example, but I'll stop there and entertain whatever questions that may be out there.
Could we keep it down a little bit back there? Commissioner Burrow.
No questions.
Commissioner Wesley.
Questions?
Commissioner Lee. Commissioner Burns.
Is this a one-time grant and expenditure?
It is. Okay. It would occur, but just to be clear, it would occur, if approved, it would occur over multiple fiscal years, because as estimated in the RFP, it's a 9-month project, so it would start, if approved, in FY18, but there would be expenditures that would happen in FY19, thus the need for the capital project budget ordinance.
A couple questions.
Yes, sir.
So we heard earlier about the improvements to Kensington and Waxhaw Marvin. Would this study take those into account?
Absolutely.
Okay. And this also has one of the other bridges that we have in town, one of the three going across it. Would it look at that, or is that separate and distinct?
I think it would look at it in the sense of acknowledging that we have a bridge that can handle 2 lanes of traffic, some level of I want to be careful with kind of projections, but some level of evaluation and analysis of what the future volumes may be on this road, and kind of making a recommendation around whether or not 2-lane bridges can typically handle that type of traffic. I would anticipate this corridor study to have some of that type of information in it.
And is it reasonable to think that, like up near Pine Oak, that it would look at intersections like that and say maybe some reconfiguration needed or whatever, given?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's a good point. And again, I apologize. It's tough to read on this graphic, but the project limits are from Bonds Grove Church on the northern end, all the way down to Helms Road. And so I think Pine Oak, the intersection of Pine Oak and Waxhaw Marvin is included within those project limits. And yes, those are the type things that would be looked at in the corridor study. I just want to point out, though, that since these are planning funds from the CRTPO, design work cannot occur as a part of this study. This is planning work only. So I think you could expect to see some conceptual level graphics and things of that nature, but not full engineering plans, because the funding source restricts the use of those funds, quite frankly.
Any further questions? Just verify for us, Attorney Spencer, we could, if we so choose, approve these as one set of motions?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay.
I'll make the motion to approve all three.
So we have a motion to approve the agreement, the motion to approve the corridor study grant project fund ordinance, and the motion to approve the capital grant project fund as a combined motion. So any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Ayes have it, 5-0. Thank you, Dennis. And you're not going too far.
Yeah, no,
We're going to talk about
again.
in-focus professional services contract.
Right. Yeah, this is actually a different contract request. No presentation attached to this one, but certainly I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. But this is a request for professional services for planning support, quite frankly, in our planning division through, if approved, a contract agreement with InFocus in the amount of $38,256. Before I kind of get into the numbers, I'll say that we've had one position in the planning division that has been open for the past 3 to 4 months now. We've gone after different candidates and we're struggling to get that position filled, and so as an interim kind of stopgap measure until we get the position filled, we're seeking some outside support to help us with the volume, the increased volume, quite frankly, of development plans that you see, some of which you've seen tonight, quite frankly, that's come before you. We also process a decent amount of buy right projects and do quite a bit of customer service work with people who are existing property owners or developers who are looking at Waxhaw as a place to invest but aren't necessarily at a point to which they're ready to submit plans. Those things take a tremendous amount of time and research, and so the existing kind of staff is pretty stretched, and again, with that being a position down, our proposal is to use some of the savings that have, or lapse salary that has occurred out of that vacant position to fund a portion of this contract if approved, and another portion of the contract could be funded out of what's being called administration contingency. And if you recall, that administration contingency is an item in the current adopted budget. There's a certain amount that was adopted in the current FY18 budget, and we're proposing to use a portion of that amount to cover the remainder between the lapse salary that we intend to use and the remaining balance on the contract. So it's not a request for funds that haven't been budgeted for. It's more so a request to use funds out of a contingency line item to cover this particular need. As proposed, the contract would have a maximum term of 6 months. It's 30-day termination on either side. So we could terminate with 30-day written notice. Consultant could terminate within 30 days written notice. And if neither party terminates, then 6 months is the maximum of which this contract would run if approved in its current form.
Questions? Commissioner Burrow?
No.
Commissioner Westlake? Commissioner Lee?
What is your confidence that you're going to be able to fill that position within 6 months?
It's not high. You know, it could happen soon. It could not. I mean, it's very difficult to predict, largely because I can't say that this is a cause and effect, but I think that what I've seen in the market is it's a very competitive market, and we're competing in a competitive market, and so it certainly is creating some time lag to when we can get in what we deem are quality folks. I mean, there's no shortage of applicants, but it's the quality applicants that we certainly want to bring in and provide a certain service level to our community and to the folks who expect that level of service.
Do we have a plan for if this contract runs out in 6 months and we still don't have that position filled?
Yeah, we do. We do. I mean, there's a couple of ways that could be handled. One, we could look at continuing the contract or a new contract, but that would, I think, be a part of a larger budget discussion. And so it's not necessarily we just extend a contract, but I think if you look at the dates, that becomes more of an appropriate time to say, okay, we're still kind of down a position. The need is not going away, or the demand isn't going away. Is it appropriate to build in the contractual support or request contractual support to extend out over a longer period of time and to have that conversation through something like the budget process?
Thank you.
Commissioner Burns?
Just want to make sure the 6-month time frame, you're not taking the current position off?
No.
So that's the 30-day on either end? Okay, thanks.
And during the 6-month time frame, you are still actively then looking to try and fill this position on a regular basis?
Absolutely.
And not looking to extend this any longer than 6 months if it's not necessary?
That's correct. That's correct. Yeah, I mean, the goal is for interim support. It's not necessarily for long-term support. Ideally, we would not even be in front of you tonight with this type of request if we were able to fill the position, quite frankly.
Are we getting candidates?
We are. We're getting a lot of applicants. It's the qualified quality applicants, and so after we get applicants and some of them are qualified, we interview, and some of the qualified applicants may not necessarily kind of directionally be where we're trying to go with the organization, quite frankly.
Okay. Any other questions? Motion, and again, this is one we can package together.
I'll make the motion to approve the contract with InFocus Incorporated and also to approve the budget amendment.
Motion from Commissioner Burns. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you.
Next up, discussion on feasibility study. Commissioner Catley.
First, let me say congratulations to those of us who've made it all the way to the end. You're doing good. You're hardy souls. Some of my slides have had to be adjusted, and some have been taken out due to the recent news about Dr. Farr, but let me just sort of see if I can go through a brief sort of history of this particular parkland and some of our parkland needs and where I hope we're going in the future. As you can see, February 12, 2013, the town purchased this land. It was cited in the minutes that it was purchased with the intent of creating a future park. Several different ideas were thrown around after that purchase, but none were ever settled on. At the time, Mayor Pro Tem Kirkpatrick is quoted in the minutes as saying, "Quality of life is not just homes and businesses, but parks and areas for children to perform activities and stay healthy." And I think that's something we need to keep in mind, and you'll see later on in my slides. We also have in June 2015, the town reached out to Trayton Homes to discuss the idea of swapping 12 acres of that parkland for 7 acres of adjacent land and a lump sum payment. In February of 2016, this parkland was listed in our town's 5-year capital improvement plan. It was listed along with Town Creek Park and the Downtown Park as priorities for our capital improvement. And then you see in April the cost estimate to design and open at least a portion of the park as a passive park was estimated at $400,000. which is, I'd like to note, far short of some of the numbers that are getting thrown around online. So you can see that's much smaller than the millions and millions that some people have suggested. The Trayton Homes deal fell through and became null and void in March of 2017. At this time, it was also mentioned that initial discussions with SPCC began as far as growing somewhere in western Union County. And November of last year, SPCC gave their presentation on feasibility, and it was voted on by the past board. Now, according to our 2016 comprehensive plan, we have guidelines for what we expect in our parks, what we require for our town. 11 acres of open park per 1,000 residents, and 17 acres, I believe that's of trails per 1,000 residents. If you look at our most current, the 2016 census estimates, I've calculated out based on those requirements. You can see we've had that 44% growth rate that we've been talking about. We would be required to have now 156 acres of park for our numbers. What we have right now is 61. That's a 95-acre shortfall from what our own plans that we voted on require us to provide for our residents. If we add in the 34.66 acres from Waxhaw Marvin Road, we can reduce that shortfall by 22%. So that's a big help in getting us to where we're supposed to be now, let alone where we are going to go as we continue to have this 40-something% growth rate into the future. Studies have shown parks enhance property values by 20%, sometimes more. A lot of people have mentioned concern about a park wouldn't give any revenue to the town. It would be not be an economic driver. That is shown in many studies to be not true. As I said, they increase the property value, which draws retail, which also, not to mention the idea of any rental facilities on a park property, if there are picnic facilities, covered facilities, if there are any other form of amenities that can be booked and rented, that is also income. We know that one of the largest growing market sectors for employers is what we call knowledge workers, the tech industry related jobs. And there have been studies that show, as I've quoted here, that knowledge workers prefer to live in places with a diverse range of outdoor recreational activities. These workers are then positioned to put their money back into the local economy through jobs, housing, and their taxes. This is another way that having a park brings revenue into a town. Parks also have a vital role in our health and wellness as a community. One thing that we hear a lot about lately, and as a mother myself, I hear a lot about and pay attention to, is the epidemic of childhood obesity. Today, 70% of children are already at risk for heart disease. That's obesity-related heart disease. Overweight and obese children are 52% more likely to develop asthma. These are the kind of things that our children are suffering from. They're dealing with on a daily basis because they don't have the healthy lifestyle that many of us might remember, running around, riding a bike, playing, climbing trees when we were younger. The things that we should be able to give to the next generation. Now, we've also seen in many studies that it isn't just their bodies that suffer when our children lack this kind of outdoor play, it's their minds and their mental development as well. Today, 25% of our children don't participate in any kind of outdoor free time physical activity. Because of this, studies have shown that they have reduced problem-solving skills all the way into adulthood. They have reduced decision-making skills, reduced cognitive function, reduced concentration, reduced social skills and self-esteem. These are all lifetime results of children not having safe places where they can recreate out of doors in the natural environment. A quote from another president I happen to be very fond of, if future generations are to remember us with gratitude rather than contempt, we must leave them something more than the miracles of technology. We must leave them a glimpse of the world as it was in the beginning and not just after we got through with it. We must not only protect the countryside, we must salvage the beauty and the charm of our cities. Once our natural splendor is destroyed, it can never be recaptured. It was mentioned by one of the citizens during public comment that we're not making any new land, and that's true. We have only so much parkland in this town, and I, for one, hope very much that we preserve it for future generations, that we develop it in a way that those children can use it as soon as possible. I look forward to budgeting for this park in the next budget. That all being said, I move that for the record, we officially rescind and terminate our portion of the feasibility study. Thank you.
Commissioner Burrow.
I think you touched on something that's very important, and that is the budget. And there's sometimes it seems like an implication that perhaps this board, the prior board, and the board before that have pretty much dawdled around with providing parks. And I think that's a fair assessment, because up until 2 years ago, there really was no budget. There was no foundational documentation on how you actually achieve something. So we are in that process. We do need to put it into a budget. If it's not in the budget, it will never get done. And that's the work before us.
Commissioner Westlake?
I'm confused. I'm sorry. What is you're asking that we end the feasibility study, but I thought that was
I was told by some residents that they were concerned that because it was ended on Dr. Farr's behalf, that perhaps they could come back later and change their mind, so that simply for the record, as I spoke to Chaplain Spencer, that we could officially put on the record that we as well are closing our side of it.
So we're closing our side just for the 34 acres,
No,
are we?
No. If you're going to rescind, you're rescinding the past board's action, what that entailed, which was a feasibility study that included that with Wingate. So it's targeted at the motion that was made back then. She's absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. That's what the motion is getting at.
I have nothing right now.
Okay. Commissioner Burns?
I would just like to state that I've always been a proponent for parks, and it's really unfortunate that the things that have happened in town with different opinions and different ideas, that it got to a point where it's pretty nasty on both sides. And I just think it's unfortunate, but I think that we need to move forward. As Commissioner McMillan said, we need to move forward. We need to work together to get this park open, to work on our downtown park and the other small pocket parks that we have, and give the people, you people, back the property and the taxes that you've paid, and give the people a park to take their children or families.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Maybe I'm confused as Commissioner Westlake, but the motion itself to end the feasibility study, does that mean that we are putting forth a motion or agreement to terminate just that particular study with that particular area of land?
Yes.
Not so much if there was something else that SPCC came back to us with that we could then...
That would be a separate study altogether.
Okay, so it's just with...
Just this existing piece of land, this existing study that was based on using that location.
That we are ending this study.
Just for the record, that they have pulled out their side, so we are officially closing our slate as well.
Well, maybe my question then is for Chaplain, procedurally. Procedurally, if SPCC has now closed their presentation or, request of us to move forward with this, and they have stated that they no longer want to do this with the town, is that still in play, or has that door, I guess, now been closed procedurally? They have stated that they said thank you, but no thank you, and they're moving on.
I think procedurally it's been closed, but there is some concern that the door may be opened again. So I think the motion on the table is to rescind and terminate. Therefore, if the door is going to get opened again, it's going to come back before this board.
Okay, so then my question is this motion necessary to move forward on if it has been removed? Because in order for SPCC now to come back again, if with that parcel of land or any other, they would then have to come before this board to make that presentation or request again of us, or?
Yes.
Well, hang on a second. Just, they only have to come to the town if they want to use or partner with the town.
Okay.
They do not have to come to the town if they want to go through their endowment fund or some other thing in Waxhaw or within our ETJ.
As it pertains to the particular area of land because it was already approved? Or in general?
Well,
the motion that was approved was specific to the parcel of land, the 34 acres. They would have to come back
to the board,
to the town, or any, just like they would have to do it with any other town that they may be talking with.
and we as a board then would have to approve that if they come back to the town.
We'd have to approve whatever they came to us with. Don't assume that they would be coming with a feasibility study or whatever.
Okay.
We don't know if they would ever come back.
Okay.
Or what they would come back with.
All right, so then my question then is this motion necessary? Is this just just clarity for everyone's sake to say the door is actually closed right now and they would have to come back? Because procedurally, I don't think that we would have to do that because they in fact would have to come back, but we are just doing this for the record?
I think it's for the record and for that slight chance that maybe they come back and they say, we sent you the letter, but we changed our mind and we're coming back.
Okay, all right.
Let's not speculate that they would operate that way. It's for comfort.
It's for comfort.
The record.
For comfort and for record.
Did you have a chance to review the presentation with Parks and Rec Director Sabinski?
No, I did not.
Okay. Where are we, Greg, with, I think in September, we gave the okay as a board to move forward with the Park and Rec Master Plan update to get at many of the questions that Commissioner Lee brought forward.
The Park and Rec Director, Dina, is currently in discussions with 3 firms about providing proposals that would get to an outside consultant helping us with an update of the current plan. To elaborate on that just a bit, the current plan needs to be updated on a 5-year basis, and in order to be eligible for the major and main grant in North Carolina, which is a part of grant, that has to occur. So that process will be something that would be coming back to the board for future consideration once we get comfortable with a firm and a scope and a dollar figure, but we don't have that yet.
Okay. And when she comes back to us with that, could she also update this in terms of, because there's a few things in here, like properties missing and things that we'd want to add to it, like the Y property and the Horton property, et cetera, things like that, just so we have an accurate inventory.
Just for the record, I did not include anything that was listed as inactive. I did not include a gravel parking lot at the water tower, and I did not include the McDonald House because those are, of course, not parks. They are not under the definition of what a park is.
But nonetheless, we have a...
They would definitely impact once they are
right.
from inactive to active, absolutely.
Right. So can we get this updated? Maybe Commissioner Lee could work with Dina and just make sure this is accurate and up to date.
Sure.
Other questions, comments?
I have a question on the, what is the time frame that the master plan would be complete?
So I think it's similar to what Dennis explained as far as the corridor study, is that we're currently in the process of talking with 3 of the firms, and part of that is what does the scope entail? So the scope's really going to drive whether we're starting from scratch with an entirely new, robust, complete redo of the comprehensive or the park plan, or whether we're simply taking the existing plan and tweaking it to reflect new numbers, new growth patterns, any additional property that's been added since the last update. And I think where we're at currently is we're looking at the latter option, which is simply updating what we have already and not starting from scratch. Starting from scratch is going to be a much longer and more expensive endeavor, and frankly, don't think that that's the right thing to do right now. So we're looking at a quicker, cheaper, and more efficient process to try to update what we have. It's not really super far out of date, but we do need to update it, and particularly if we're going to be eligible for grant funds, we've got to get that done.
So your guesstimate is 6
Probably,
months?
I think we'll probably have something back to you in the next couple months for board consideration. We want to get it done as quickly as possible.
And so the grants can be done immediately, or be submitted, or written, or submitted immediately?
No, we will not be submitting any grants until the board adopts a new update to the comprehensive plan.
No, that's what I mean.
So
But after that, it can be done.
based on the submittal cycles.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, and just in that vein, I know Director Sabinski submitted 2 or 3 grants on the obesity side, but we keep falling back to we have to have an updated, accurate Park and Rec master plan. The other comment I want to make too is, will it look at, I mean, we're underserved south of Pine Oak, and will the Park and Rec master plan update look at how we balance for the whole town?
Yes.
Okay.
And just another point of clarification, with any grant proposal that we do have or we may want to write, we still need that master park plan in place in order to do those grant proposals and grant writing. Otherwise, we cannot move forward with them.
And to speak to that a little bit, some grants actually give you points depending upon if you're adding new amenities that don't exist. And so that's the case of Pardiff. So unless you've actually studied and taken a look at what you want to provide in a particular park, it's hard to submit that and actually have a competitive grant without that information.
Which is why then the Parks and Rec Director will be working to try and put something together over the next few months so that we do have those things in place and can move forward with that and then begin our grant proposal writing for funds.
Correct.
Okay.
And then I doubt we'll be ready for the retreat, but we have to wrap this into from a capital improvement plan. You really haven't approved one other than within the pay-as-you-go model. Because we also have to address the top 2 needs within our capital plan, as the citizens talked about, the traffic flow and congestion and maintenance of our infrastructure, sidewalks being a big one as well.
Yeah, to get to that point a little bit, there are 2 projects that are funded this year in a pay-as-you-go model, and that's Nesbitt Park improvements, which are restrooms and shelter area and some storage area, and then additional improvements as far as play equipment and shelter area in Town Creek. Other than that, there are currently no funded projects that are out there other than the YMCA project that would address park needs. Now, YMCA is partially funded, but there are significant portions of the construction budget that are still not funded.
Unfunded, yeah. Any further discussion? I have a motion on the table to take the action to rescind on our side the feasibility study. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Ayes have it, 5-0. And with that, we have no closed session topics. It's 9:15. Do we want to talk about anything else or just call it a night and adjourn? I'll take a motion to adjourn. That was a hint.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.